Hi, nice to meet you all. Thanks for your time and for the invitation. How's everybody? It's a long trip. We come from Mexico. We just arrived today.
Oh.
So I will come sometimes more fancy, but sorry, was delayed. The plane was delayed.
Glad you could make it.
Yes, we're here. Happy to contribute.
Yeah.
What we do in Kapital is we created the first data-driven neobank for Latin America. We do business banking and credit for SMBs. And since we're a data company, I'm going to give you two little facts for everybody that is here and that is watching us. Is SMBs, they find a vital role in the economies, right? They represent 90% of the businesses are SMBs in the world, right? More or less 50% of the workforce. So it's humongous, right? So the way we do it in Kapital, jet lag. And here it goes. What we do, all our financial products that we offer, we also want to share the owners of the SMBs, their financial visibility, right, on our data platform. But the thing is, we also wanted to give something more, give back in a way. So that's why we partnered up also with Doconomy, and we give all the owners all the carbon footprint that their employees are doing with their credit cards that we offer. And why we did it that way is because the owners are the only ones that can create this awareness of what's going on and transmit it to their employees. So that's why we decided to start it in the top and from bottom down. And that's what we're actually doing. And we see that it's working. And we didn't decide to do it in the B2C part because in Latin America, where we're based in Mexico, and we operate in 4 different countries. They don't know what's going on. And we studied this and we were seeing that it doesn't matter what you tell them, doesn't matter what you do, there's not enough awareness going. Because in Latin America, we're still developing. We're not as advanced as in Europe, America. So it's a little bit different and more complicated to communicate it. So that's why we decided to start it with the owners of the SMBs. And we show them that in their banking, when they log in and they want to do a wire, they see their carbon footprint and they start asking. And when they start asking, it's like, maybe you're starting doing something different. And they started questioning and they started measuring it. You put that seed in there. So it becomes, then they just start behaving more and more and more. And that's what we do around here, Kapital.
So Pamela, can you speak to any examples of a small or medium-sized enterprise that is already embracing climate action and doing it in a great way? Any actual examples?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, we're in the US, so I'll try and mention maybe a couple of US examples. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm in New York this week, because we're about to launch a US campaign here. So we have lots of different SMEs in our community, of course. So we're a global initiative. We have over 5,000 companies who made the SME climate commitment from 100 countries. So as you can imagine, it's quite diverse. Now, if we look at the US, for example, some of the companies we have are companies that are experiencing firsthand the impacts of climate change. So, for example, we have Legacy Vacation Resorts. They're a hospitality company. They have properties across different states in the US. And, they've had to deal with hurricanes. They've had to deal with wildfires, which is obviously impacting their business. And so right now, across their properties, they're trying to switch to renewables. And they're seeing amazing results, not only because obviously they're taking action on climate, but also because this is helping them strengthen some of their business partnerships or also engage their employees in a different way. So that's one example. But we also have other types of companies that have really sustainability embedded at their core. And I guess a good example here is Numi Tea. So they're a tea company, as the name indicates, of course, and they really have sustainability embedded into their ethos. So all the decisions they make are based on this, from the raw materials that they source, the packaging that they use, the way they transport their products. So all of this is based on sustainability decisions. And both of them are part of the hub because, they have an interest in not only taking action, but also, in being part of a community of like-minded businesses that can work together.
Right, thank you. Any examples, Shulene?
Yeah, so in terms of like small and medium-sized businesses that are engaging, Klarna is a member of an organization based out of Berlin that's called Leaders for Climate Action, and there are a number of businesses that are actually involved in which kind of monthly or regularly the groups get together and they talk about what they're able to achieve, what they're kind of trying to do, and on the platform, people can write about, like the companies can write about kind of different initiatives that they've taken, and they can start discussions amongst themselves. So what's really cool is we're able to kind of separate into groups based off of industry, types of companies based off of industry, and share ideas and have this discussion. And I think that that's what's really pushing the needle forward. And I think that a lot of these companies are kind of doing it in two ways. Like they're looking at their own operations as a business. So in terms of like their employees and transport and that kind of thing, travel and buildings and green electricity and that kind of stuff, trying to reduce their emissions that way, but then also trying to provide kind of the most climate-minded products that they can for their consumers. So using recycled materials in their products and that sort of thing.
Great. How about you, René? Any examples of your clients who are doing this well?
Yeah, well, since first of all, we try to put the example first, and then that's how we replicate it to them. All our products, for example, our cards, are recycled plastics, and on the dashboard where they interact with is we try to, when they start asking how they can reduce their CO2 footprint, we tell them how they will like to contribute. So we try to make it the part of the problem, like not just tell them what to do, like we question them. And then we create a newsletter and then we tell them to share with their employees. And that's how we like to interact with them, like putting an example and then they become the example in order to transmit it to everybody around their places. I mean, they're amazed when they sign an airplane fare. I was like, no way. Yes. So there's no trains in Mexico, by the way. They're developing one in the south, yeah. But then that's why we always try to do it for themselves. We just put the seed, like I was telling before, and we help them that they start, because if they don't question themselves, then they're not going to do it. They don't want to do it and just going to see, there's something else, and boom, that's it. Nothing's going to happen. No, that's why we show them to them in order so they take better decisions based on climate action. Mm-hmm. So we do a little bit the other way around.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, what do you think the biggest challenges are for small and medium-sized businesses when they're trying to work on this?
Well, I think that's a great question. And right now we're heading into a recession, so it's going to get tougher, right? They know they know where it's coming. So it's going to be, that's what's going to happen. And the way they see it, it's green. It has a bad fame that it's more expensive. So the world that I will like to share is they need to be resilient, because everything is in the long run. You don't need to see goals, short-term goals. No, they need to be long-term goals, and you need to start by something, right? Like we did it. We changed our providers. Instead of using the cheap cards, plastic cards, we changed with a little bit more expensive, but we find another way to recover that amount of money that it cost us. And you need to become more agile. So that's what we always tell them: be agile on everything, and then you will always find a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that. So in terms of SMEs, I think that one of the biggest challenges is resources, just because they probably don't have a very large workforce. So it's hard to imagine kind of allocating specific roles for this, as well as, having a climate action program or having a sustainability program for a company is pretty big undertaking, like to make a commitment to say, like, we want to reach net zero by a certain year, like that can kind of feel like an arbitrary decision. So I think that resources kind of do have to be set aside, and has to be kind of from the very beginning of the fabric of this company saying, okay, like this is something that we want to prioritize. And through that, I think that they would be able to kind of infuse it into all decision making and say, for example, like, oh, we want to have part of our revenue or some kind of like mechanism in order to invest in climate action, so climate advocacy or carbon removals, that kind of thing. And I think that through that, it only becomes easier. It's like it is an investment in the future. So I think that, yeah, SMEs would definitely struggle with this, but I think it's becoming more and more relevant for newer companies that this is just part of, you know, their identity, because this is what customers are looking for.
Mm-hmm. What would you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that, for example, like a small company, do you think has the budget to create like those kind of stuff that you mentioned? Because they don't have them. That you're talking, I know you come from a pretty big companies, but the SMBs, they don't have this department for this, department for that. So it's kind of, it's interesting what you're saying and your perspective, because the SMBs, I think that they behave a little bit different that what we are used to it, right? So it's a pretty complicated question that you're asking us, and
Totally.
yeah.
What would you add, Pamela?
Well, I would add a couple of stats, as a matter of fact, because we try and check in with our community of SMEs on a regular basis, precisely to understand the barriers that they face. And we ran our last survey towards the end of last year. And so from that, we were able to identify three main buckets, so to speak, three main types of challenges that SMEs face when it comes to taking climate action. The first one that came up, and bear in mind that, you know, the SMEs who are on the hub are often the first movers. So, you know, SMEs who are already, you know, committed, want to make a difference. So I'm not saying that this necessarily applies to everyone, but the first challenge really that we were able to identify is education. So SMEs need to understand their role in the climate crisis and where they can find the right resources and tools. And, you know, that's part of what we're trying to do. Yeah. Second one, definitely capacity. And that means obviously, you know, staff, time, funding. So the lack of resources internally. And that's also why we need to make it as easy as possible for SMEs to, you know, use the tools, take action. And that brings me to, you know, another thing that we said, it's the business case. So they need to, because they're stretched and have so many competing priorities, they need to have enough reasons to prioritize climate action. And that brings me to the third bucket of, you know, challenges that we've identified, which is the lack of incentives or misaligned incentives. So other ecosystem players need to step up, again, to help make the business case. That means big buyers, again, multinationals, like offering preferential contract terms. That means, you know, government setting up incentivizing policy. So it really needs to be a collaborative effort.
So my next question, you know, it jumps off of that. You know, are there business benefits to SMEs, you know, doing work to improve their carbon footprint? Yeah.
They can't sleep well.
Well, as a matter, I'll add another stat to that. I think I might have said it.
You need to send me that survey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
No, it's available online. It's on the hub. So yeah, 97% of our SMEs said they wanted to take action because it was the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that they're taking action as a result, but they want to. So we need to enable them, empower them.
I think that the most important thing that is going to happen is when the time comes, when they need to choose between a provider that it's a vendor that it's a carbon free company, or the other one when it's cheaper. That's when the moment is going to be interesting. When is it going to go? And I think you said the most important thing about all education. Yeah. And in Latin America, we're way behind.
We're actually going to be running activities in Latin America.
Oh,
we can touch base after the event. But just to go back to Alison's question about the business benefits. So the first thing that I will say is that often taking action is a way to reduce costs, because it's a way to improve efficiency across the business. So that's the first point to make. If you reduce your energy usage, if you reduce your waste, packaging, travel, if you make these conscious decisions, well, you do two things at the same time. You reduce your emissions, but you also reduce your costs. So efficiency is key. And then to go back to what René was saying, yes, taking action is also a way to navigate the expectations of all these other stakeholders, from big buyers who've made ambitious climate commitments that include their scope 3 emissions, so their supply chain emissions. They want to work with sustainable suppliers, all the way to consumers. Because what we're seeing in industries that are really driven by consumers, so tech, food, retail, generally speaking. So consumers want to prioritize brands that prioritize the planet. And then also, let's not forget about investors. So, increasingly investors are looking for sustainable companies. So companies small businesses that have climate action plans, or even better, that are working on green solutions and products, well, they will have better access to capital as well.
I agree.
Yeah, I think also going off of that, also thinking of the consumer perspective, because I think that for a lot of these SMEs, their most important stakeholder should be their consumers. And yeah, I can also add some stats. So the Klarna does a quarterly survey for its consumers, and we found that 75% of our consumers find it important that there is some kind of sustainable or recycled material in the products that they buy from the brands that they purchase from.
Worldwide?
Worldwide, yeah. So that's what we found. And we've also found that 72% of consumers think it's important that the brands that they're purchasing from are actively combating climate change by either reducing their own emissions or by removing carbon from the atmosphere by buying those credits. So that's a really large majority of consumers that we're kind of looking at. And I think that in terms of, SMEs, if they want to better connect with their consumers, if they want their consumers to be able to identify with them as a brand, because oftentimes, consumers do buy based off of brand, not necessarily just product, then it would be, a great business benefit to be able to provide what they're looking for and show that, okay, like our business goals and like what we're trying to achieve here, it aligns with yours. And so, I think that just making that connection by having that goal those goals that are shared would be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should create like an international, for the SMBs, thinking big. You're making me think big right now, you two girls. Every SMB will need to do something that is fighting climate change. Whatever. It doesn't matter how small it is. Like putting in their offices 3 different trash cans. You can start from there. These small things are the ones that get you to the big one. And then you start creating that culture with everybody. You need to be the example. You need to educate them. You were saying. That's what, and there should be rules that apply to this. Like there's commitments to get to the Paris Accords, and I especially I don't think we're gonna be there. I don't see it coming near. Let's be honest. And the time's gonna keep coming and we could be talking about hours, and we can say we all fight climate change and peace, whatever. But you need to do it. Instead of speaking it, just do it, be the example, and then try to tell everybody to do it. I think that's the easiest way. Be an example. That simple thing. There's a lot of things that we cannot stop using right now. That's a fact. But you can look around the other way around and do it and choose it. Like there's like, I would like to tell a small story, but I don't think we have enough time. But yeah.
So we touched a little bit on the ways that large companies can help support small and medium-sized businesses to reduce their climate footprint. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, especially, small businesses don't have the resources for this. Larger companies do. Some of them we've heard from today. Pamela, maybe you would want to respond on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know, and I think that probably in the program, this stat was already mentioned. So we know that for large companies, supply chains emissions often constitute the bulk of their emissions. So they're on average like over 11 times higher than their operational emissions. So large companies have a vested interest in making sure that their suppliers, including their small suppliers, so long tail of suppliers, are taking action. Now, what we're seeing is that there probably needs to be a bit of a carrot and stick type of approach. Traditionally, big businesses have prioritized their so-called tier 1 suppliers. So they're bigger suppliers that have like a bigger carbon footprint. But increasingly, we're having to also engage the smaller ones. And when it comes to the smaller ones, well, the carrot right now, it's probably more important than the stick because again, these small businesses are stretched. They don't really understand how they can go about taking action. So companies really have a role, big companies have a role in educating them supporting them. A lot of them are, now thinking of preferential contract terms or supply chain finance to empower these small actors. And then once these smaller businesses will be more empowered, then yes, we can think about integrating this into procurement processes and requirements for suppliers. But there really needs to be a bit of collaboration first. And collaboration also applies to, other peer companies, so other big buyers, because the one thing that we would want to avoid is having too many of these big stakeholders come up with, their own frameworks and their own requirements, and SMEs would find themselves having to deal with too many different types of, requirements from different stakeholders. So there needs to be, yes, a consistent environment for them to operate in.
Great. Shulene, what do you add to that?
Yeah, so I can speak to kind of the experience that Klarna is having. So for us, our main way of engaging with SMEs is through our suppliers, because as you said, suppliers and scope 3 is kind of where the majority of our emissions come from as an online business. And what we do is, so because Klarna does calculate its emissions yearly, we do have a very, very clear breakdown of kind of the categories and where those emissions are coming from. So what we can really do is target the ones that we kind of work with very closely, as well as like have, I guess, a great amount of spend with, and see where they are in terms of their climate journey, and really engage with them and provide them with the details that we are able to see based off of our emissions calculations, and give them kind of insights into how they compare to other suppliers or other companies that might be doing a similar thing that we also work with. So really just using our relationship with them. I mean, with procurement, we do kind of choose our suppliers based off of a number of criteria. And so like adding sustainability to that mix and including that as part of the conversation that we have with them on a regular basis is something that we would like to do to engage them and to help them get their climate action in and to reduce their own emissions.
Great. So go ahead. Well, I was just going to say we have about 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to jump in and ask if you all would give advice for small business owners, medium-sized business owners, or anyone working with any of those businesses on what they can do to help. Maybe you could begin that one.
Yeah. Just to quickly say what we do in Kapital about this. We give them cheaper products. Like we are a financial institution. That's the way we help them. If we see they're going to do something that is green, consider green for us, we help them with a cheaper loan. That kind of stuff. SMBs need flexibility. That's what all they need to operate. Now, yes.
So what's your advice for these businesses?
Well, education. Share it.
Great.
To everybody around.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to do the calculation and be transparent about your emissions. I think that doing the calculation and sharing it is better than kind of just ignoring it. So yeah, kind of jump into that and try to get a gauge of what your business is doing and how you can provide that transparency for all of your stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to build off that. I think that the main piece of advice that I would have is just take action now. Don't fall behind. We just don't have the time, and you don't have the time if you're a small business. If you want to stay relevant and competitive, you need to start your journey to net zero now. And I know that it's scary, but you can be transparent about your journey. You can be transparent about your challenges. And there are platforms out there, including the SME Comment Hub and others, who can help these small businesses. So just go for it.
That's really important because they don't know that how they're going to be affected by climate change. But the SMBs will definitely be the ones that be the most affected. So that's why, good, yeah. Let's help them out.
All right. Anything else you want to add? Anyone?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
this was
your
great.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.